Tonight on DarkLens Diaries, we're putting one of the most recent paranormal books under the scalpel, Victoria Jaye's The Black Hours, Modern Demonic Experiences in Folklore. This isn't a storybook, it's not a horror novel, it's not another slick ghost hunting TV spin-off. This text is closer to a field guide, a compact reference manual, a checklist for sorting genuine claims of the demonic from the noise of fear, folklore, and fakery. And that makes it unique. That makes it worth our attention. And that makes it worthy of a cultural autopsy. Where others give you jump scares, Jaye gives you lists. Where ghost hunters pull out gadgets, she pulls out criteria. That, my friends, is a refreshing, maybe even radical, why didn't I think of that approach to the paranormal? So let's open The Black Hours, and let's see if what walks in the dark can survive the light of analysis. In 2021, as a graduate student at the University of Utah, Victoria Jaye submitted a thesis with an ominous title, In the Presence of Evil, Demonic Perception Narratives. At its core was something new, a classification system for organizing, understanding, and validating reports of inhuman encounters by anchoring them to the senses, what is seen, what is heard, what is smelled, what is felt. That framework became the spine of The Black Hours, her 2025 book. Let's be clear, this book isn't a collection of eerie anecdotes stapled together for the airport gift shop. It is not campfire entertainment. It is a working manual, slim but functional. The title, The Black Hours, is borrowed from medieval devotional manuscripts, books of hours written on black-dyed parchment, ominous and rare. Jaye uses the phrase to signal oppressive, invasive darkness said to accompany demonic activity. But unlike the old manuscripts, this book isn't about prayer, it's about criteria. Jaye doesn't ask the skeptical question, do demons exist? She tells us they do. Instead, she reframes it. When people claim encounters, what patterns emerge? And that's the real entry point. She treats testimonies as data, folklore as evidence, and haunting as something you can almost chart. To understand the checklist, you first have to understand folklore. Folklore is not just old fairy tales, dusty legends, or quaint superstitions. Folklore is living culture. It's how stories, warnings, and beliefs travel through communities. It's how we transmit fear without a PowerPoint. Alan Dundes reminds us, folklore is not just the story, it's the social function of the story. When someone says, my cousin's friend saw a shadow demon, they aren't just reporting. They're performing belief. They're participating in a ritual of caution, a narrative tightrope between warning and entertainment. And in that ritual, patterns emerge. Across cultures, so-called demonic encounters cluster around a surprisingly stable set of motifs. The oppressive wait at night, often sleep paralysis. Think of it as the body's way of screaming while your mind is awake. The shadow at the threshold, often peripheral vision phenomena. The corner of your eye, the rabbit you swore was a man. The whisper, the growl, sometimes explainable by infrasound. Or maybe your upstairs neighbor is practicing opera at 2 a.m. Jaye doesn't dismiss these experiences. She says they recur, they resonate, they form a corpus. In other words, even if it's not a demon, it's meaningful. The danger isn't always the demon. Sometimes the real danger is our interpretation, how natural events get recruited into folklore and suddenly become terrifying. In The Black Hours, we see both, folklore as culture, demon as predator. Jaye's conviction is unwavering. Demons are real. But the checklist allows us to measure belief against sensory experience, not just imagination. Her own story, dark, deeply personal, terrifying, doesn't need black t-shirts or shaky cameras. The human stakes were enough. It was R.M. Renfield meets My Ghost Story. She tells it here. So what does the author actually give us? A framework, a system, a useful alternative to ghost hunting theatrics. Jaye urges readers not to fixate on a single symptom. Look for clusters. The more senses engaged, the more weight the claim carries. This is clever, it's practical, and it's a bit like swapping your Ouija board for a lab notebook. She organizes phenomena by the senses, drawn from infamous books of demonic encounters. Sight, entities flipping off observers. grotesque exposure, not cinematic head spinning, but small, vulgar ruptures that stick in memory. Hearing, murmurs, moans, mimicry, voices that imitate the living. Creepy, yes. Possible, yes. Proof of the supernatural? That's what the checklist helps determine. Smell, sulfur, decay, bodily fluids, the kind of stink that makes you question whether you're haunted or just unlucky in sanitation. Feeling, pressure, weight on the chest, assaults, including ghost sex. Yes, it's in there. And yes, you can mark it. Individually, each could be dismissed. Collectively, they form patterns, and patterns matter. Unlike unreturned library books gathering dust, this manual expects engagement. Marks, circles, underlines. It is a workbook. The author never stops believing in demons, but she gives us tools to triangulate, measure, and ask, is this phenomenon demonic, or can sleep science, neurology, and acoustics explain it? Demons are real, rare, and terrifying, but the Black Hours shows that careful observation and pattern recognition don't diminish terror, they refine it. They make the unknown legible, and that, my friends, is the subtle power of Jaye's text. And this is where we take up the scalpel, the cultural autopsy. Let's examine 3 pressure points in this text. Modern ghost hunters. The idea that demons respond predictably to Christian artifacts. The historical problem of the word demon. Each is about control. Control of narrative, control of fear, control of the audience. As with the previous cultural autopsy, where we uncovered the artwork of John Wayne Gacy and Richard Ramirez as cultural artifacts on an artistic continuum stretching back to 1591, we need to dissect certain assertions and observations in Victoria Jaye's book, including the nature of demons, the relevance of the word, and modern ghost hunters. First, the ghost hunters. If you've watched the shows, you know the ritual. Night vision cameras, black t-shirts, gadgets that beep and whir. Jaye offers a paper and pen checklist, a completely different aesthetic of authority. It's like swapping a PowerPoint for a scalpel. Suddenly, you realize you've been playing dress-up while she's doing field work. American cinema raised the demon flag to the top of Healy Hall in 1973 in We Story about a pleasant little one called Regan. Her vomitus continues some 50 years later in the form of Gen X men traipsing around abandoned buildings with spirit boxes. This is the next body we need to bury, with Victoria's help. We've always wondered what kind of baby you'd get if one parent was nuisance animal control and the other was the curse of Oak Island. Now we know. But I digress. Jaye disrupts the performance by handing us a clipboard instead of a crucifix, a checklist instead of a camera. She says, here are the patterns, decide for yourself. Still, no cultural autopsy from DarkLens Diaries can be complete without throwing some dirt on this tired corpse. As most metal fans understand, we had to wait for the manifestation of Tool to release metal from the sonic idiom of Metallica. This feat was no less athletic than Kierkegaard jumping over his own shadow. However, we are still waiting some 51 years on for ghost chasers to be more than the frustrated launderers of little Regan's bedclothes. These made-for-TV liberties bend around themselves more than Clippy when we apply even the slightest scrutiny. Jaye's aggravation comes from more than the sloppy camera swings towards bumps in the night. Folklore needs some degree of consistency, and labeling everything as a demon abandons that consistency. Employing the artifacts and rituals of the Catholic rite of exorcism, see Volume 2 of the Ritual Romani, is only intended to remove demonic possession from people. And in Catholicism, ghosts are disembodied people, not demons. Second, the artifact problem. Modern demonology, especially on TV, relies on cinematic theology. Crucifixes repel, Latin invocations burn. But when we consult scholars like Dr. Ammon Hillman, the only philologist working on ancient Christianity in the context of pharmacologia, the idea that demons respond to props looks flimsy. This is our most pressing objection to a fundamental tenet in the Black Hours and modern demonology TV, the link between demonology and Christian artifacts. If we take seriously Dr. Ammon Hillman's mind-bending work, the true kryptonite of demons cannot be this cinematically obvious when our telling of the good news may be wholly off base. However, if we read these stories as folkloric tales, the origin stories become clear. Consider the madman of Gerasenes. Not unlike Athenodoros' chain-rattling ghost, stories like these have inspired campfire tales and English literature for 2 millennia. True or not, they exist as origin tales. They precede the metaphysical framework that gives meaning to Christian artifacts. They show us that the motifs, crucifixes, exorcists, and Irish priests are human, cultural, and narrative in nature, not props. Demons are not waiting for holy water to act. In that light, artifacts are an unconvincing measure of the demon. Theater, folkloric props, storytelling tools, not zoological repellents. Finally, the word itself, demon. In The Black Hours, the author traces the term through Abrahamic traditions, but here she falters. The linguistic history is messy. Dr. Hillman reminds us the Greek texts came first. Christianity was born in a Hellenistic linguistic cradle, not Hebrew. Conflating demon with devil is a theological shortcut, not a linguistic fact. Yet from a folkloric perspective, precision may not matter. Words work in the air they're spoken. Demon in the modern tongue means something visceral, something with teeth, something that flickers in the dark. Jaye writes it with the conviction of a field biologist tagging a jaguar, as if demons can be logged like species. But she also uses it as a folktale keyword, a shadow word. That double exposure, zoology and folklore at once, creates the paradox. If every story is evidence, then every squeaky floorboard risks becoming scripture. And sometimes those squeaky floorboards are just creaky floors. That's the lesson of a cultural autopsy. Know the difference, but don't lose the story. So what do we take away from this autopsy of the Black Hours? First, that the book is serious. Serious in tone, serious in conviction, serious in its attempt to offer a usable framework for people who take the demonic seriously. Second, that folklore is both fuel and filter. It explains why the same motifs echo across continents and centuries. It explains why people still whisper about shadows in doorways and pressure in the night. Lastly, that belief itself is part of the story. Whether or not demons exist in the zoological sense, the word demon has cultural power. It has narrative teeth. And when a scholar writes it down like data, that power doubles. The autopsy shows us a text that is part handbook, part folklore, part testimony. It is both deeply personal and academically ambitious. Does it resolve the question of whether demons are real? No. But it sharpens the question. It gives us a grid, a vocabulary, a sense of how to measure the immeasurable. And that's what earns this book its place on our bookshelf. This has been DarkLens Diaries. Until next time, keep your notebooks ready and keep an eye on the shadows, sounds, smells, and feels.